Well, I was born and raised here all 18 years of my life, about to be 19. My dad moved here 34 years ago, I think. And he moved here because of the seclusion of the town and how it had that country feel. He loved it, and I've loved every year of it. I wouldn't have wanted to been raised anywhere else. Well, for the past 4 years, I've worked for the city for the teen program, and it's a great program. I've been doing it. All the kids in Sunset Valley have been doing it, so it brings us all together and it brings us closer friends. And the work we do, it really it feels good when you can help the community. For the past 4 years, my favorite year was probably one of this last year's because I'm the oldest and I finally became an intern, and it gives you a little more freedom. And the benefits that you get with doing it and just staying close and it being right there, literally up the street, it's your job. It's nice being right there. Couple stories I have are the floods, I guess, being right there next to the creek. We've had 2 bad floods, I guess you could say, that actually came into our house. So those are probably 2 of the most eventful things that's happened to me here in the city. The first time it happened, I was really young, so I don't remember it too much. But the most recent time was these past Halloween floods, coming up on a year now, actually. And that was probably actually worse than the first time, and that was something else. And the way the city handled that, and after how the city came together and helped everybody, was really nice. All the workers, they came in and they were on 24-hour shifts. They were sleeping up at City Hall. And the way the city brought people in up at City Hall whenever the flood was happening, they did a very, very good job at handling the events that night with the response. The rescue team did really well. And then it smoothed it out a lot quicker than I think a lot of people expected. So it was like in a few weeks, it was almost like everything was almost restored back to normal.
Malcolm and I started dating when we were 16 years old, and he and his cousin would come by and pick me up and bring me out in the Jeep to go in the mud in Sunset Valley and ride the Jeeps and that shoot the guns. And then I really kind of forgot about it, and after we had been married a while, we decided we needed a bigger house. And so Malcolm's dad said, "Have you looked in Sunset Valley?" We went, "No." And so we came over here and looked and chose the lot. And we've been here almost 40 years. Moving here, my first recollection is that our children, our 2 sons, Trey and Brandon, had so much freedom to roam around. The street was not paved, so no one could go down it fast. You couldn't keep the house dusted, but they couldn't go down fast. They played in the creek, and they could walk from Sunset Valley over to Cherry Creek, where some of their best friends lived. And now it's much harder to do all that. But the great news is we're a little oasis in the middle of the city of Austin, and we can go just right down the street now and do almost anything you'd like to. Well, when Malcolm's dad brought us out here, he told us that the streets were named for the first person who bought a lot on it. And so Reese Drive, the first person that built a house on it was Reese. On Pillow, it was Pillow also. And the rest of them weren't quite done that way, but the very first ones were. And we have enjoyed watching Sunset Valley grow. I never thought that there would be that much more to it, but it's kind of funny when they call us Old Town, and then now we have the villas and the meadows, which are really nice. Gives us a diversity, but keeps us as a community.
I was chairman of the Board of Equalization for about 5 years under Francis Underwood as mayor, when Sunset Valley had a city tax. Of course, I wasn't the most popular person at that time. Back when I was a youth, it was totally rural. Most all the streets were just bladed with a tractor, and they weren't paved. Their horses were everywhere, and I love horses. I'm just not that good a rider. Nowadays, with the shopping centers on Brody Lane, the income that comes into Sunset Valley is wonderful, and it makes up for way back when. Even in 1975, the city had trouble making their budget of $90,000, and we had a We rented a patrol car and a radar gun, and the constable was a volunteer. Of course, we were accused of being like Selma, Texas at that point as a radar trap. But we got past that. And now it's just wonderful. The restaurants we have in here are just incredible. Back when we moved in, there wasn't anything out this way. The closest restaurant was Hill's Restaurant on Congress. But now in Sunset Valley, we've got such a variety, it's just wonderful. We still like to see the wildlife. We see the foxes go through our yard. There's guineas that we enjoy seeing. The birds, the squirrels. So we're still rural in that sense, and I like it. The Valley Park at the end of Reese Drive was the area where I grew up going to with my family when I was young, and our dad allowed us to have a single-shot .22 rifle so he could control the situation, and we'd toss the soda water cans into the creek and pop them back then. That's back in the early 50s. Now I take my grandkids down there. There's the equipment to play on, to things to explore, and we love to explore in the creek. And that's what they really want to do, is explore in the creek. So I do it too. I was a Boy Scout a long time ago and then a Scout leader, and I thoroughly enjoy that. But we used to be able to shoot in the backyard and things like that. And we did for a long time, even after, I think he's 75. At some point, somebody was practicing too much, maybe down on Pillow or the next street, and people got upset about that, and that's when the ordinance was passed to no discharge of firearms. When my dad and uncle were developing Flournoy Acres, they wanted to also use that land that's the other side of Williamson Creek, and they were intending to put up a bridge to go over that direction, and there's a short little street off of Sunset Trail called Claremac Drive. There's not a sign up, but that's what it is. The neighbors on either side of it are using it as their driveways to their homes. But when they were pricing the bridge, they found that it was going to cost them way too much money. So the lots on the other side, the area which is Cherry Creek, would have cost them too much per lot at that time. So they ended up not doing it. But there is that little street there, and it is paved and even has laid down curbs that go right over to the creek. And that's Claremac Drive. The name Claremac, my dad and my uncle were the developers of the subdivision. My dad went by the nickname of Mac. My uncle was Clarence, so they call that street Claremac. And that's where it got its name. When my dad and his brother started the subdivision, they needed electricity for it. They contacted Austin, but Austin wanted to charge them a tremendous amount to bring the electricity from where the city limits was then, and that's the late 40s, all the way out to their farm they were making into a subdivision. So they got a hold of Pertinalis Electric Co-op, and they agreed to bring it to them without charge. Austin got wind of this, and the next thing they knew, Austin agreed to bring it out at no charge.
Oh, it was just beautiful, just absolutely beautiful. We had dirt roads, we had low water crossings. If it rained, I couldn't go to work. Sorry, sir, I can't get there today, the creek's up. Now what a wonderful, who else can say that, you know? Now that was another reason I loved living in Sunset Valley. My boys, it was too far for them to go down to the drag and get in trouble. They were out in the country. My boys, when they first saw the house, when we first moved there, they were coming around the front yard, and there was a patio built off away from the house and kind of near the edge of the hill. And they came running over there and said, "Look, Mom, a bandstand." And that was their first introduction. So then it was a year or two, three later, when they were about 13, they were like 9 and something when we moved there, they had their first party, and they were going to have the party. And so I said, they came over, and this young man came up and introduced himself and swaggered up to me and put out his hand and says, "Hi, I'm rock and roll Ronnie. He was about 12 or 13 years old then. And I've never let him live that down, I might say, although he's a CPA now. But they had their first party. It was outdoors, playing on the bandstand, and the following Tuesday night at City Council, they passed an ordinance that said there will be no live bands played outdoors after 10:30. And so, I don't remember how late that first party went, but after that I told the boys that the ordinance was 10 o'clock. So then I had that 30-minute little break in there to get them shut down and play the last tune. I can remember them dedicating the last tune to me, and this sort of thing through the years. But after the band stopped at 10 o'clock, we'd go downstairs, and all those big oak trees I told you that had died, there was lots of limbs and lots of wood to be hauled, and we'd make a bonfire. And the boys said they wouldn't have a party. I said, okay, we need to do some work around here though. If you're gonna have a party, we gotta clean up. So they get their friends over and they make this big bonfire with the wood that they dragged up from the woods. And after the band stopped, then we'd go down to the field and light the bonfire. And then the kids would all get sleepy and go home. So it worked out really, really well. That ordinance was a big help to me in my parenting efforts at that time. But I have had people still refer to this ordinance as the black ordinance after the black kids that instigated that ordinance. It's just been a great place to live, close to the earth, and you can feel the direct benefit of your conservation efforts. And I love it. We have the shopping centers, we have the tax base, we have money to do major projects, we have money to put our electricity in the road, repave the road, we can do all kinds of wonderful improvements to the area. So things have just progressed and gotten better as the city's gotten the tax base and money, and sales tax base I'm talking about. Having a voice in decision making is terrific. I mean, I've been on boards and national board of directors of national organizations, and you fight one step forward and you just get knocked back 2 steps. But in Sunset Valley, you can speak up, you can have your say, and a lot of times you can get your way if you're on the right track. And if you're not, then you get explained pretty quickly why you're not, and then you don't want to be on that track anymore. So it's really having the local government that is hands-on and small and neighbors is truly, truly special. Only that I love Sunset Valley, and I do everything I can to help expand. Community development was my committee, and to help expand the connection of the different parts of Sunset Valley, and I think that's best done with trails. And I'm hoping to have some support for some connective trails between the neighborhoods and do them right. I brought back pictures from Oregon where they have trails down the middle of neighborhoods so that people can cut through and get off to some place that everybody wants to go. And I've brought back things from other places, other trails. In Colorado, there were some great trails there that were through neighborhoods that were not offensive to the neighbors, or at least the neighbors appreciated them. So I don't think trails have to be a negative. I think they can be a real positive. So I would love support for that from anybody who would like to join me in that effort.
Well, we bought in 65, I guess it was, we bought our 2 acres from Mrs. Lynn Groover. And we bought down here because our daughter knew Sandy Turner, went to school with her, and she kept talking about the drill team that was in Sunset Valley. And so we bought land down here so she could be in the drill team. Well, it was not very many houses. We were much further apart. Then the streets were unpaved. Now they're paved. We had no street lights. Now we have lights. And we have cable for TV, which we didn't have. We didn't have gas in here. It was all electric. Just more, it is now a city when before we were country. Didn't have all of the modern conveniences yet. City sewerage now, before we all had septic systems. Makes a difference. Then later on, I joined the fire department because the men were gone. But they told me, well, we don't think you can drive our trucks. And I said, well, unless you got an awful big truck, because I learned to drive. My brother worked for Texas Crushed Stone, and he brought home an armored car. So I joined the fire department. And Mrs. Underwood, Frances Underwood, she did too. And we had a lot of fun together. And of course, her husband would go with us every once in a while. And she and I, we were at that time driving what they called a brush truck. And that's just a pickup truck with a motor and a big water tank. You could just rest assured that every 4th of July, instead of them letting the kids get in the field and shooting up on where the pavement was, they stood in the middle of the pavement and shot both ways. So you could just figure about 12 o'clock, boy, we were going over to put the fire out. Well, Mr. Underwood went with us one time, and she and I, we parked the truck, set the brakes, and away we went. Well, we jumped the ditch, and all of a sudden we heard, help, and we looked around. Well, he didn't jump the ditch. He fell in the ditch, and we got him out of the ditch, and then she had to patch him up. And so I went on and tried to get as much of the fire out as I could. But we had quite a few very interesting runs.
I was a part of the very first teen program, work team program that they had, and Ernest Robles was the one who was in charge of it. Tom and Katie, who are still here, they were bosses too, but Ernest was the main one who oversaw all of us teens. And it taught me a lot. It taught me, even though I have horses and grew up with horses and dogs, I still had to have a responsibility of work. Not just so much on them, but on not just my life involved, but all the teens and individuals that we had to work with on a daily basis. I can remember when it was just houses and like we had nobody behind us, and I can remember as a kid grazing horses. It used to be a big hill, and we'd go over there and play and ride, and it used to be such a small knit community and everybody knew everybody. We were all just a community looking out for each other. We're still able to have that little city feel, but be right next to a big, huge city. It's nice to know that, you know, grocery store is less than 5 minutes away, but I can still have my horses in my backyard and I can wake up and they're right there.
In the middle 70s, I moved to Austin I was married then and moved here with my husband, and we had a landscape business, and we had a client on Pillow Road, the barbers, and we first came into Sunset Valley because of business. And later on, when we were looking for a place to live and actually purchase, we found that there was a house available here. So we called up Pat Barber and asked her, and she said, you just have to come here. She said, it is just the most marvelous place, and you have to go to every city council meeting because it's the best show in town. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, for instance, One of our residents brought a recorder one day to the meeting, and the then mayor didn't like that and actually pulled a gun out from under the table and set it up on the table, and Travis County had to break that meeting up, Travis County Police. So I thought, boy, that is pretty interesting, so we wound up moving here. On the day we were moving in, kind of a grizzled old feller came and said he was the town constable, and he was just coming to say hello and meet us, and he said, "You're probably wondering why my holster's empty." And I said, "Well, it had occurred to me it was strange." And he said, "Well, the council took away my gun after I crashed the car twice." And he said, "Wow, I've caught chicken thieves," and he kind of regaled us with a few stories. And so we thought, boy, this is going to be very interesting. Well, in the initial years, I think it would be difficult to be a citizen here and not be involved. Even at, as you know, I've been on the council, I think, 3 or 4 different times. But back then, we had a budget of about $50,000 instead of $5 million or whatever. And if we had potholes, the people that lived in the vicinity of those would have a pothole party, and we'd buy cold mix and put it in to the potholes, and the men would run up and down it with pick-me-up trucks, and the ladies would make sandwiches, and or if you had to dig up a water line. So everybody kind of participated in the maintenance of the whole place. Back then, you did a lot more work. We have staff now, but councils did everything. If there were bills to be written, I mean, ordinances, we stayed till 2 in the morning. We wrote them ourselves using models from other cities and whatnot. So Helen Bessie and several other people, all of us would stay very late and write and do stuff. And so those of us that were here for a long time were very participatory in the city. Well, I miss horses running up and down the road. That was a daily occurrence. That's a big difference. I think, unfortunately, we've lost a little bit of our country flavor. I know we're hanging on for dear life to what's left of it, but we've lost a little bit. You know, there were cattle in town and chickens, and the corner of Brody and 290 was hundreds of beehives. We had sheep on Oakdale, and I miss that part of it. You know, we now have commercial things and more new neighbors who have brought some totally wonderful new ideas to the town. We've liberalized compared to what we used to be. The mere fact that our 60th anniversary is going to have alcohol sales when that would have just been totally verboten in the past. So those are some of the things I think that have changed a lot. We're a little more legalistic. I think we have more rules now than I care to have. Before it was a little more live and let live, and now we seem to have an ordinance for everything, and that's a difference that I don't always consider positive, but I guess it comes with urbanization and being modern. I think the fact that we have maintained as much autonomy and country flavor while being totally surrounded inside of Austin is pretty unique and pretty special. And those of us that have been here a long time fight tooth and nail, I think, to keep that spirit going, that we want to know our neighbors, we want to take a pot of stew over if it's needed. That's the kind of stuff that still exists here like it would in a small town elsewhere in Texas. Back in the day, before we had any staff, I said that the city council members did basically everything. And there was a resident who was attempting to fill creek area and lowland area in order to make more saleable land. And so this person invited a lot of construction companies to dump their fill on this particular piece of property, which was a problem for the floodplain areas of our city because we have a flood-prone area, so you don't want to fill in the areas that are naturally flowing. So Helen Bessie and I stood out on Brody Lane and we took pictures and license plates of all of the dump trucks that went in and off the property concerned, and used it as evidence to get a restraining order and eventually a removal order for all that fill. And that sort of represents to me a lot of what Sunset Valley was about, people pitching in where they knew something needed to be done and doing it, and kind of hoping everything fell into place the way it should. People that want to live in Austin find this like this gem, this jewel, right smack dab in the middle of this town, this huge, huge town. And here's this strange little community of people that are maintaining their autonomy and have a great need and want to participate in their own government. And I think that's pretty cool for a town the size of Austin.
I like Sunset Valley because it's not one of the big cities where everything is just city. I like how it has little forest areas that you can walk through, and how it has small shopping centers, but they're close enough to where you can have everything that you need at hand's reach. I do babysitting in my neighborhood, and I walked my neighbor's dogs for almost a full summer now because she has been busy with a new baby. I've also helped the Polises with their garden and juiced for them whenever Miss Cheryl is out of town.
Okay, first recollection was the streets were in the meadows, but there were no houses. It was just meadow. It was just grassland up to your knees. That was pretty much the first impression. It has grown a lot since then. I think largely because of the growth around us. There have been so many changes. We've grown into a bigger small town. I think biggest change, organization. We have a city administrator now that made some changes. Mostly just not so much the people who were here. We have a lot of more urban people now. That's a big change. Just getting bigger. Underneath, the soul is still there. The government, everybody has a say. That's not typical. You don't find that very often. Some say more than others, but everybody has a say, and we've seen some direct changes because of it. It's also unique in that it's like living in the country, only we have town, we have restaurants, we have shopping. It's just really kind of a nice blend. Oh, I did want to say one of the unique things about Sunset Valley is the city employees. All the employees, all the people who work in the city, we have such a really good bunch of people, and we are thankful to them. So, thank you.
Again, a very fun thing. Whenever we would move with the military, you knew you were only going to be there 18 months to 2 years, and so you jump in right away, and I always got involved. And so I said, I like people, and I like to get involved. And so I got onto the welcome committee. An interesting point, I was walking around the streets welcoming people that had been here longer than I had, which was always kind of cool. And then I got involved with community and economic development with Mary, and we had lots of fun. We did all kinds of interesting things to bring the community together. And I think that's what I really enjoy doing, because it's not just old Sunset Valley or new Sunset Valley or new Sunset Valley. We're a unique community, almost a microcosm of the political scenario, and to get everybody involved was something I thought was so important. And so I tend to go blah, blah, blah and talk to people and get folks involved. And so that's really, I think, where my strengths are. And I think as a community we are merging. Whenever we do spring fling
or in the fall whenever we honor our police officers and firemen and stuff, we get full community support, which is something I think is really neat. So that's a huge change to see the political scenario in the community. This is what I think of when I think of small town and where I want to live. So not a story per se, but it is a unique kind of feeling that I feel very blessed to be a part of. Whenever we started working on doing a senior activity thing each month, we started it when my mom, who had Alzheimer's, was living with us. And I took out invitations to every senior, and the police officers would go around with me, and we would hand deliver each invitation. I got to meet some of the neatest people, and I'm sure there'll be some of those folks who are on this video because some of the senior members of our community are still very active and out doing things. So hopefully we'll get to hear from them as well.
I building hotel here like 2003. So I, after couple years, buy house, city Sunset Valley. Small town and nice people here. My neighborhood very nice, and city Sunset Valley, good staff, and all policemen like friendly, help us. So this way I move here. Good service, city Sunset Valley, all people, help, anytime. I'm coming here, no make appointment, so everybody shake my hand, so it's like, the city Sunset Valley be growing, and a lot of people looking for space. I'm gonna try buy more land here, and maybe building something business,
Yeah, I was in Austin night, and I was living at 902 Gardner Avenue, and and I was really frustrated with the city government in Austin, and with the lack of citizen input, that it didn't make any difference. It appeared often, most of the time, not to make a difference, and the city staff seemed, at least part of them, seemed entitled, and the taxpayer was like third priority, not even second priority. So I wanted to go somewhere where I could participate in government and live in a community, and that's how I ended up in Sunset Valley. Well, when I came to Sunset Valley, I think it was in 1991, like I immediately fell in love with the place. At that time, none of the development had happened. There was no new neighborhoods. There was no commercial development. And so for something to happen in Sunset Valley, everybody had to join hands and do it themselves, work with a very small staff and do it. The staff was really friendly, really open, the city staff. I ran for some elections here in Sunset Valley. I won every one of them. I feel proud of that because it's a privilege to serve here, because people really care. There's an environmental consciousness here. There's a real sense of community here. The city government and citizens work together. There's real input into government. So this is a great place to live. Well, then we had no money, and now since the two business districts were developed, there is money. In fact, that allowed, Sunset Valley at one time had the highest property tax rate in Travis County. And I was on the council, and I made the motion to eliminate the property tax once we had the sales tax coming in. And it passed. So Sunset Valley basically is unique that way. I think I want to tell the city of Austin's story. So we had been fighting to basically to exercise our responsibility, the aquifer. Austin had this 15% impervious cover around Sunset Valley. And so I was mayor at this time, so I got with Toby Frutrell, I think was her name, who was the city manager in Austin, and I can't remember who the mayor was, but I also talked with him. And we came to an agreement that we would give them part of our ETJ if they would enforce the SOS ordinance. Because at the time, Lowe's was going in, and we were limited, because as an ETJ, we were limited as to what we could require. And so they were going to put in a high impervious cover development. And we didn't want that. There was also some apartment buildings, etc., in that area, and the cost of the fire service was expensive. It was part of that ETJ. So we made an agreement with the City of Austin. We'd give them that piece of the ETJ if they would enforce the SOS. They agreed to and put it in writing, and then promptly didn't enforce it. They allowed Lowe's, they basically collaborated with Lowe's and to give Lowe's what they wanted. So we we joined with environmental groups from Austin and sued the City of Austin and enforced their water quality standards in that SOS ordinance, that area, and that became, they bonded it, they worked closely, City of Austin worked closely with Lowe's. We worked closely with the local environmental groups, SOS and Save Barton Creek guys, and at the legislative level, they started trying to get a bill passed that would take away basically our right as a city. It was kind of a retaliation, and to force the issue, we had a successful legislative effort, which was basically a holding. It was basically a fight to hold them off, because we didn't have the power to make anything happen at the state legislature. But we did have the political, a good strategy, and we were able to hold them at bay at the legislature while we entered into negotiations to resolve the lawsuit with Austin and with Lowe's, and we ended up settling it, gained a lot better treatment of water quality. We got a better lighting ordinance, so there wouldn't be so much invasion from the parking lot lights into the Oakdale neighborhood. We got dollars to protect the critical water quality features and to buy up property so it wouldn't be developed. And we held them up at the legislature until the deal was done, so they never could. So they dropped it there once it was settled. And I feel really proud, and we gained great respect in this area for that, for our willingness to take on. It was a David and Goliath kind of thing. In Sunset Valley, I actually think we prevailed. The development that did go in was a lot better, lot more responsible, and they had to pay us cash that totally paid all our legal costs, plus money to buy property and protect critical water quality features. Sunset Valley now is more like a small big city. Has a lot of the big city issues, but it's still a small town, very small town. It's a cool place, guys and gals. It's a great place to live. It's worth fighting for.
When we moved in 1963, when my family first moved here, there were probably 10 homes, if that, on Reese Drive. There was a lot of vacant land on Reese. Sunset Trail had more homes. Pillow and Lone Oak didn't have as many. And the streets were gravel. The county would come out about twice a year with their blade and blade it all off, throw down some oil on top of it, and call it a day until the next rain. Jones Road was a little narrow two-lane county road that attached to Brody. It was tree-lined, mainly with hackberry trees. So when the Jones Road was repaved, the fence line was taken down and all the trees were removed. And it changed its rural atmosphere to more of a city. When my parents acquired the property that they moved in at and it was number 26 Reese, you didn't have a street, well, you had a street number, but everybody's mailing address was a route number. It was Route 5 out here, and I can still remember ours. It was Route 5, Box 434. And for a long time, when you cut through Upper Sunset, you could see the little marker up there at South Lamar that showed the route number. Then as the city grew, the first shopping center was developed. We started getting some city money. The police force originally was a marshal, was Gordon Fowler. He's the one I remember. There might have been some before him, but he's the one I remember. And if you had a problem, you'd call him. Of course, there were no cell phones, so you'd hope somebody was home. and he'd come help you out. The first major flood I remember out here was probably in mid-60s. I think I was at UT at that time. And Williamson Creek rose up, and we lived, like I say, at the end of Reese, not all the way to the end, but one from the end. And the water came all the way up to the edge of the road from Williamson Creek. So in the 60s, if you imagine it rose that much with rain, we would have been totally inundated like the October flood we just had this past year because of all the impervious cover we now have. We had this old fire truck and that we had in our original city hall in that little kind of a story and a half thing.
Mary Jo Powell was the driver.
Yeah, Mary Jo was the driver. Francis Underwood calls me, and Mr. Braden has set his backyard on fire. He was burning brush or something, and he had a couple of horses back there. And here Francis and I mean, I am dressed like I just gotten home from someplace. I mean, I've got nice shoes on, nice slacks, lightweight sweater, stuff like that. And we are out there manhandling that fire hose. And you don't realize how heavy a fire hose is until you pick it up empty. But when it's got water in it, oh my goodness. And we're out there trying to put that fire out. And her husband comes over and tries to help us. She and Herbert have got the fire hose under control, and they're shooting water on it. And I run back to my dad's house, and I'm hooking up as many hoses as I can get together. And I'm dragging them across the next door neighbor's yard. And I mean, we're trying to put that thing out before the whole neighborhood goes up in flames. And it was just like, and when we're finished, we just look at each other and just like, I can't believe we just did that. You know? Because basically that's what we had was a volunteer fire department for many years. And when the word went out, they would call you. We had like a phone tree, and it's like, okay, let's hope Susan's home. Let's hope Mary Jo's home. Let's hope Robert Publisa's, at home or somebody like that. And it's like, oh my goodness. When we had the opportunity to buy green space, we started doing that to protect our boundaries, so to speak, but to also give citizens the opportunity to go out and enjoy what we have in our city. The wildlife, the flowers, everything. The highway was put in, they found a cave under there, so the plans had to get little changed there. That's why if you notice when you're driving out west on 290, the road splits and there's a little grove of trees there in the middle. That's the entrance of a cave. And I think under your house, Mary, you've got a cave. There's a cave under Burger Center. When it's real quiet in the gymnasium in there, you can hear the water dripping. And it's from the cave that's right under that facility over there. It's been a great place to raise a family. I mean, we haven't had a lot of children in the neighborhood. When Robert, my son, was little, this has probably been about 28 years ago or so, and I don't remember if your kids participated or not, Mary, but we had a little 4th of July parade. And they got on their bicycles and their little tractors or whatever else they rode around on and decorated them up. And they went down Sunset Trail and we had a good time, but that didn't last very long.
A good question. You know what's interesting? When we first moved here in 2002, which isn't actually, it's 12 years ago, so it's not all that long ago, is we kind of loved the different aspect of it from being like living inside the city of Austin, that things were a little more spread out. And it was obviously much quieter. It's gotten a little busier since when we moved here, even just in 12 years. The loss of the farm, I mean, I think that was, the shopping centers there are good things and everything, but that change has been a big one. And the traffic on Brody Lane has really grown a lot too. So, but it's nice that we still have our nice quiet parts of our neighborhood and things like that. But just even in the 12 years we've been here, it's been incredible change. And gotten a lot busier. The street we live on is really, although it's named a couple different names, it's really just a circle. And that circle is a lot of fun, and we have kids that run around all over the place, and getting to know our neighbors and spending time with them and looking out for your neighbors, I think, is a huge thing. And we really enjoy that. We enjoy the other parts of Sunset Valley and the fact that when we do things with the city, we know the people at the city, and the police officers get to know us. And so, it's fascinating. I don't know how the police officers ever get through their drive-thrus because everybody's always talking to them. You see somebody and you wave at them and talk to them for a while. And so I think we feel very safe here. we feel very much part of a community that's wonderful, and I think those are the things we really like. The most interesting thing that I found about Sunset Valley that I really like is the ability to live in a house and live on a street, but then walk 5 minutes and be out in the middle of a nature area where you can't hear anything anymore. You can't even hear traffic, and I think that part of, for me, having to drive what I did once Concordia moved, my commute doubled up to Northwest Austin. Just to have someplace nice and quiet you could go and walk has been something we've really, really enjoyed about Sunset Valley. It's a great story about this place, and the arts festivals and the music venues we have here and all those things. I just really, really like that. And it's not saying we don't frustrate ourselves sometimes too, but it's, we're really, the ability to be in the city but not in the city is the story we really like about it. What's so amazing is when we talk to people about living here, people go, "You live in Sunset Valley?" And they said, "Yeah, we do live in Sunset Valley, and this is the best deal around." Seriously, we do.
First memory of Sunset Valley where I can remember something that made me then question, where am I, was the donkey. So it was before I lived here, driving through as a shopper, and I was a little confused as to why I was in a shopping center, but there was a donkey, and I loved it, and I didn't know anything about where I was at, but there was something, that's what put it on the map for me. From that day forward, I paid attention. I actually wanted to shop here more, which I realize now, something about the donkey actually made me want to shop in the shopping center. I'm a horse person, so something about that just was really cool, even though I don't know that I consciously made that connection. So shopped here for years, and then bought a house near Sunset Valley, would drive down the squiggly road. I know some people hate that road. Also was kind of an endearing thing because it made me feel like I was in a special part of Austin. I think at that point I still didn't know that it was a separate city. And then at some point I actually took the time to go down the older streets, and that's when I really fell in love with the city, and I realized there was something different about it. I'm a goal setter, I have been my whole life, and at that point I set a goal for myself that someday I was going to live here. And it took me about 3 years to make it happen. So the donkey is where it all started.
On Brody.
On Brody, and then by the time I moved here, the donkey wasn't there anymore, but still lived in the city. So I also remember figuring out who's the donkey is Star, where does Star live, So I actually followed through on that after I moved in to go say thank you to the donkey. Exactly 1 year after I moved in, I think a few days, had to actually literally wait until my 1 year anniversary had hit to submit my application to volunteer for city council to run. So May of 2009. So I was wanting to contribute sooner. I had to actually live here for the required minimum time to sign up. So 2009 is when I became a council member, and I've been serving ever since, either as council member, mayor pro tem, or mayor. But the position of being the mayor of the city is something that I really do take seriously. It means a lot to me to protect the city, whatever that means, to keep things running in a transparent way, to keep the people who've lived here longer than me happy, to make sure that essence of the donkey on the corner, that we still keep that in our city, that even though the donkey may not be at the corner of Brody, that we do whatever we can as time rolls forward, that we still make sure that our city stays unique, true to what it once was on some level. And it's very important to me that residents that have lived here for 20, 30 plus years, it's important to me to hear what they think of where we're at now. Are we still unique? Are we still special? Are we doing things right? What needs to change? Because the cool thing about living in a city this small is that when you want something to change, you actually can change it. Sunset Valley is unique. We really do have the great things of Austin. We have music. We have neighbors who care about one another. We have differences of opinion and different age groups and different ethnicities, and people who lived here a little bit of time and a long time, people with chickens, horses,
And I think that's great. You actually, even though people come to Austin thinking that's what everybody has, we're pretty special and unique in that we really actually do have that in Sunset Valley. We really, truly have this little tiny pocket of perfection. And it's a beautiful city, and it's a city where we really take pride in caring for it and protecting it from change. That being said, we clearly have adopted change in the city over the last 10, 15 years. So certainly to go back 60 years, you can say this city has very much had its finger on the pulse of things changing, and we've kept up just enough, but without losing what's special about the city. Fun memory of being in the city after I had moved in. A little after a year, I decided to run for city council, and this woman who I'd never heard of, never met, named Mary Black, called me up. And in my memory, it's something like, I've lived here a really long time and you're about to be on council, so I want to make sure you know the things you need to know about this city. So I'm going to come pick you up this Saturday and I'm going to drive you around the city and just tell you about things. I thought, never in my life have I had something like this happen. Sure, absolutely, this sounds like fun. So you picked me up in your pickup truck. You said, okay, roll the windows down. I remember it was hot. It was like, roll the windows down, because this is an interactive tour. And you just took me up and down the streets of the city, and you told me about, I mean, a little bit of it was politics, but that's not actually the part I remember. More of what I remember you telling me were just anecdotes about neighbors, who had lived where for how long, who had relatives that once lived on one property, but now 2 or 3 generations later, there's somebody different living somewhere else. It's where I learned that my next door neighbor had a relative who lived on one of the other streets. That's as if I wasn't already in love enough with the city and I'd already signed up to be part of the community and volunteer. That was the day that I knew I've landed. I'm not leaving. This is it. This is where I'm going to stay forever.
Well, that's fun.
This used to be one of the quietest places you could ever imagine. There was no Westgate, there was no 290, there was no Jones Road other than a little gravel road. You could go out, and if your kids were playing on the next street over, you could yell at them and they could hear you. And it was a very close-knit group. Everybody knew everybody. There weren't near as many of us. And we just got to be real close friends. It was like a big family. And some of that is still here. And most of it in that generation have moved out. Way back in the 60s, I was the tax collector and city secretary. Oh, wow. When the city council met in the mayor's house, and the taxes were all the same for everybody. And the council meetings were very brief and not much business going on because life wasn't near as complicated as it is now. They met in the mayor's home, whoever was mayor, because we didn't have a city hall. We didn't have any city buildings at all. There was a whole group of kids that were in the drill team, and when I first moved out here, everybody had horses in their backyards, and they practiced across the street. And Helen Vaughn, the lady on the north side of the creek, she trained people for English style riding, and she used the empty lot over there as her classroom, and she had a lot of horses up there. Like Susan said, we've had some scary times with fires and not having a fire department. We had to depend on Austin, maybe, and Bergstrom would come out when it was an Air Force base, and maybe Oak Hill after they got one. And oh, I know of one. There used to be a lot of Air Force people when I first moved into the neighborhood, because Sunset Valley was the limit as the pilots could live away from the base out at Bergstrom. And there were several pilots on our street. And we knew when they were back in town. They would buzz on their way to land at Bergstrom. The floods are something to remember. And we had lived in that house for 53 years and never had a drop of water, and sympathized with the people that did and tried to help out as much as we could. As a matter of fact, the ones that used to live next door to us would stay with us till they got their house dried out. And then this year, we had, I guess, a 100-year flood. So now we know what they went through, but it's not going to happen again, and we didn't leave. But Sunset Valley is just a special place. I don't think there's any other place like it.